The basic task for Marxists, socialists, progressives around the world today has to do with the need first to understand what the problem is, and second, to organize and mobilize all people who can be reached to deal with the problem, understanding what it is, and then mobilizing to change it. By that I mean something very specific, that our problem is not this or that economic policy or political regime or party or government or this or that injustice. All fights about such issues are worthwhile, but they are not sufficient. People do fight around particular issues, but the unique contribution of Marxists, socialists, and progressives who have understood is to see that the problem behind all of the particulars is a general problem, and that is the problem of the capitalist system. A system that organizes production in a particular way, the production of goods and services in the enterprises that do the work, the factories, the offices, the stores, where goods are produced and distributed, and the same for services. Capitalism is a particular way of doing that organizes the work so that a very small number of people at the top, the owner, the chief executive, the board of directors in a corporation, they make all the decisions, a small minority of people, and the vast majority do what they are told. They only have a job if the minority brings them in. They only keep the job if the minority decides to do that. They come each day, they work, they leave behind the fruits of their labor, their mind, their muscles, and they go home, and the employer minority keeps what the majority has produced. Capitalism divides people into employer and employee. And in that way, capitalism is quite similar to feudalism that divided people into lord and serf, or similar to slavery that divided the people in production into master and slave. What a progressive mentality, what a Marxist or socialist movement needs now is to say it is the end of all of those systems that have a minority dictating to a majority. No masters, no lords, and no employers. There's the capitalism. What's the alternative? Well, a system without that split between employer and employee. Workers can and should become democratically their own employer. Whether you call this a worker cooperative, or a producer cooperative, or a collectivized enterprise, really doesn't matter. What matters is that the workers together become their own boss, their own employer, so that when the decisions are made in any enterprise, any factory, any store, any office, it is a democratic decision, one person, one vote for all the people who work, together to decide what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the fruits of their collective labor. Teaching people that capitalism is the system behind all of the particular problems is a way of introducing the strategy. The best way to solve these individual problems is with a system change. And let me illustrate that as follows. There are two big and one new problem of capitalism that I want to bring to your attention. First is unbelievable inequality. The richest 400 people in the United States, for example, own more wealth than the remaining 325 million people. 2,000 roughly billionaires in the world own half of the wealth and more than the poorer half of the world, 3.5 billion people. The level of inequality produced by the capitalist system is grotesque, is unacceptable, is immoral, especially when you remember that the poorer half are the ones who die early, who suffer from diseases for which we have the cure, who go hungry, who cannot raise their children, who suffer unnecessarily in 100 ways. You could cut in half the wealth of the richest, they would still be the richest in the world, but you could transform the lives of more than half the people on this planet. Capitalism breeds a level of inequality that is intolerable. Number two, capitalism is a fundamentally unstable system. Every 4 to 7 years, it has a crash. We've had 3 in the 21st century. The so-called dot-com crash in 2000, the so-called subprime mortgage crash in 2008 and 9, and now the coronavirus crash. 3 in 20 years. Instability, a moment when millions of people are thrown out of work, lose their job, lose their income, suffer enormously. We're going through it right now. And here's the third one that is exposed by the COVID, the coronavirus. Capitalism did not prepare for this virus, even though we've had viruses for the last centuries. Viruses happen from time to time. Any rational system would have known that it needs to store around the world supplies of masks, gloves, the materials for nurses and doctors, hospitals, beds, ventilators, the tests to determine who has the disease. Everyone knew what was necessary because we've gone through it. But the capitalist system didn't produce the results. You know why? Because it's not profitable for companies to produce things that may be needed later to help the public health. They didn't have the money to do that. It wasn't profitable. It isn't profitable to store it in a warehouse somewhere either. So it wasn't profitable. And governments who believe their job is to support capitalism, they didn't do it either. And so we have a virus killing tens of thousands of people because the capitalist system did not learn from previous viruses what to do. And if they did learn, because it wasn't profitable, they didn't do it. Capitalism is a system that makes profit the bottom line, that makes profit the number one goal. And if there's a conflict between profit and the public health of the people, profit is what is pursued. You know, the world got rid of kings. It got rid of emperors. It got rid of other systems when it became intolerable that they put the values of profits for a few against the basic life and health of the many. These are examples of issues that are the result of a capitalist system. The contribution of Marxism is to show how and why that system works in such a way that the mass people, the needs of the mass of people, are not met. Capitalism has outlived its historical usefulness. It is now a system for keeping a very small number of people rich at the expense of most people in the world, even when it comes to a point of life or death. It is finished for capitalism. The world needs to move on, and the next step is to organize people so they understand that system change is what's on the agenda for the world now. Say goodbye to capitalism in the same way that the human race said goodbye to slavery and feudalism. We need a system of equality and democracy in the workplace, the end of the employer-employee relationship. That analysis and that strategy is what Marxists and socialists can and should contribute to the world today. This is Richard Wolff in the United States. Thank you for your attention.